Hi guys, Freddy here. Welcome back to the desktop for another retro RPG. And this week I would like to present this. The Star Trek The Role-Playing Game by FASA from 1983. This is the second edition. The first edition came out in 1982. Now this is the basic game rather than the deluxe edition. The deluxe edition included a Starship tactical combat simulator game, which handled sort of starship battles, but the basic game handles that through character skills more, instead of having big tactical maps. You can buy the tactical simulator game separately with more advanced rules. So you can buy the basic game and the tactical simulator and merge them together into a more fully fleshed out version of the deluxe game. Now, this came out in 1983, so is obviously only based around the original series. The Next Generation didn't come out until the early 90s? I can't quite remember. But the FASA only released 2 sourcebooks for the Next Generation. But in those, they tended to cover more military things. It showed sort of phaser cannons and tanks and things for use on the surface. And Paramount, who created Star Trek, or created it at the time, didn't like the path that FASA was taking it. They felt it was too militaristic, so they removed the license from FASA. So in 1993, I think it was, Star Trek role-playing game went out of publication. Now, we've had a couple more in the years since. We had the Last Unicorn Games version, which went out of publication when they got bought over by Wizards of the Coast. And we've got the newer version, which I have to admit I've played and is a whole load of fun. But this is the original. As I said, this is based around the original series, so we've got a nice painting on the front cover here. Although I have to call question with the faces. McCoy looks almost evil here, and I don't know what the expression on Kirk's face is at all. But let's have a look at the back of the box. Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Its 5-year mission, to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before. In Star Trek, the role-playing game, each player assumes the identity of a character in the Star Trek universe. While controlling the actions of his character, the player leads him through one adventure after another, facing new challenges and unknown dangers. Each game is an ever-changing story as players solve near-impossible puzzles, complete dangerous missions, or simply battle to survive. The game may be played by 3 or more people, ages 12 to adult. Now you can join the USS Enterprise. All that you need is right here. Included are the following: the Starfleet Officer's Manual. This 40-page book contains information on how to play the game. With it you can create and train your own Starfleet officer, as well as direct his actions in ground-based adventures. Included are introduction and a glossary for players new to role-playing games. The Cadets Orientation Sourcebook. This 40-page book contains information about Star Trek universe. It includes illustrated sections on the races and governments in the known universe, as well as photo-illustrated sections on the organization and equipment of Starfleet. For players new to Star Trek, there is a timeline of events and glossary of Star Trek terms. Game Operations Manual. This 48-page book contains all the information necessary for designing and running games. It has sections on designing adventures and presenting them to players. There are sections on judging character generation and actions planetside and in space. And it includes 2 dice. Well, this I bought off eBay because I did own the role-playing game back in the day. I got it in the mid-80s, this version, the second edition, because I remember I was having to travel the length of the country for a funeral, and I wanted something to read, so I bought myself a role-playing game to read on the bus as I travelled. Now, during a move or something, I'm afraid I've lost it. I had a whole bunch of source books as well, so I'm trying to get some of those back because they were marvellous. I really did like the presentation FASA did. I'm a big fan of theirs anyway, because obviously FASA did Shadowrun, a game system which I played a lot and I'm a huge fan of. But I got into them through this. Now let's open the box, because it is a lovely box. And inside, the eBayer I bought it from has provided 2 dice. They are not the originals, because I definitely would have remembered if one was a pearlescent dice. We have the Cadets Orientation Sourcebook, the Starfleet Officer's Manual, a FASA catalogue for 1988-89, which shows when this copy was bought, the game operations manual, and a FASA Corporation mail order form. It shows all the things they sold at the time. Star Trek Next Generation Enterprise Blueprints for $15. Let's have a quick flick through here. Renegade Legion. Battletech, of course, a great game. Again, one that I owned at the time but seems to have disappeared as I've moved houses or whatever. Star Trek Games and Rules supplements, including the Starship Tactical Combat Simulator, the Basic Box, the Romulans, the Orions, the Federation, the Klingons source books. Next Generation Officers Manual, Starfleet Intelligence, various rules and supplements, Witness for the Defense, Trader Captains and Merchant Princes, Ship Construction Manual, the one source book that I still own, the one which hasn't disappeared over the years, the Orion Ruse, Margin of Profit, the Outcasts, Matter of Priorities, Doomsday Like Any Other, where the Doomsday machine out of the original series turns up again, and the crew of the USS Fife has to deal with it. Mines of Selka, Graduation Exercise, Where Is All the Glory Gone, Return to Axanar, The 4 Years' War. Even more. Decision at Midnight, Imbalance of Power, Conflict of Interests, Dixie Gambit, White Flame, The Strider Incident with regular one-deck plans. And some wonderful little miniatures. I only had a couple of these. I had a USS Enterprise, I believe that one, from the series, a Romulan Warbird, and a USS Grissom. I can't remember the class of vessel that was. I had those 3 miniatures. Not that I used miniatures at all. Anyway, let's get the box out of the way and have a look through these books. So let's start off with the Cadets Orientation sourcebook. Start off with a fairly nice table of contents, and we have an example character here, Lee Sterling, Lieutenant Commander, on board the USS Lexington. This character is used in all the examples of gameplay, and that's very, very useful. So when it tells you how to run combat, for example, which is dexterity plus marksmanship modern divided by 2 is your skill to hit things, it will go 67 plus 20 halved, and that's your score. It uses this really as an example. The only problem I have is that some of the text is a little faint. It really looks handwritten in, and they haven't calculated out the max op end, which is basically how many hit points you need to be at before you start to collapse. We go through here, and we've got a timeline laying out everything from the original series. Star Trek terminology, so antimatter, exploration teams, United Federation of Planets, Terra, star dates, quadrants, and a quick introduction to the races, the Andorians, the Caitians, the Eodans, Edoans, that's the proper pronouncement, or pronunciation even. I can't even pronounce. That's proper pronunciation. The Edoans and Caitians are obviously from the Star Trek animated series, so it does lift from that, because obviously that had come out beforehand. We've got the Gorn, humans, Klingons, Orions, Romulans, Tellarites, Vulcans, Tholians. Now, if you're playing Star Trek, the Vulcans are the overpowered species. Not only do they have special abilities beyond any other race, because they have telepathic powers and the like, but they live longer than everybody else. And Star Trek is a bit of a career-based game. So while your human officer, your lieutenant commander may have served 10 years in Starfleet and gained extra skills for those 10 years, your Vulcan can have served 60 years in Starfleet and just have way too many skills. We've got the governments laying out how the galaxy's laid out. Starfleet Organization, Starfleet Insignia, but of course this is just the original series, so we're not onto the pastel uniforms of the motion picture. Encounters in Space, Various equipment. So, aqua lanterns, belt lights, communicators, psycho tricorder, subcutaneous transponders. Various weapons. The Klingons have agonizers and Mark I disruptors. Gorns have blasters. Hyposprays, neural paralyzers, protoplasma. Detention force fields, the ship's log, just going through everything. If you've watched Star Trek, rather, you'll know what the most of these are. And then we've got the Enterprise personnel file. So we've got stats for Kirk, Spock, McCoy, Scott, Sulu, Uhura, who at this point doesn't have a first name, Nyota, I believe she's been called later, Chekhov, Chapel, Janice Rand, Lieutenant DeSalle. Then we've got some other characters, so Kor, Koloth, Cyrano Jones, Harcourt Fenton Mudd, Sarek, Khan Noonien Singh. Seems a bit odd that we've only got 2 of the 3 Klingons that appeared in it, because there were 3 Klingons. Kor, Koloth, and Kang, I believe, were the 3. The story of Lee Sterling. So it details the sort of background story of the sample character we saw earlier. Talking through his history and how that goes into the rules. So, your Starfleet career, what terms of service you've played or your character's been through. And then we've got the Starfleet Officer's Manual. Now we're starting to get into rules, because that's been very rules light. Although it had a character sheet in it, it's not really detailed anything rules basis. So this is more an introduction to role-playing. So what are role-playing games? About the Officer's Guide, role-playing the Final Frontier. Defining a character, going through the different attributes, the different skills you've got. You can have leadership, you can have life sciences, computer science. The computer science is a bit blanked out there. Interesting story I've got is one of the guys in my group bought these rules way back in the 80s, and that printing error, which has just blanked out part of the word there, had actually blanked out the entire combat section. So we used to joke that it's Star Trek, you're not supposed to be going around fighting all the time. And it turns out that's why FASA lost the license, is because Paramount thought there was too much fighting in the game. Creating a character, assign ship skill, assign ship rank and position, choosing a race, and sample heights of all the different races. Training player characters. So it goes through branch school, cadet crews, department head school, command school, post-academy experience, and tour assignments. We're going to the combat statistics, your character's age, tactical movement and combat. Tactical movement system is counted as alternate rule. You don't have to use it. But without it, I think the game's not quite as interesting. But basically every character's got a bunch of action points and you spin them to turn in place, to move, to use your weapons, etc. We go through the combat rules here, the various weapons. We've got an entire page here on special Vulcan techniques. So Vulcan's the only one who gets psionics, nerve pinch. We've got injury, medical and recovery, glossary of game terms, and that's through that. And then we're on to the games operations manual. So basically the hardcore games master rules. Designing adventures. So how to write a Star Trek adventure. Steps in adventure scenario design. Planet-side adventuring. Strange new worlds. Gives you a sample world log to use. Different gravity types. Earth planetary size. Earth planetary size. Atmospheric density. General climate. Just a few things to think on. What the dominant life form is like. What alien tributes they might have. Modifiers for feeding habits, tactical movement and combat statistics. New civilizations, so technological levels. Sociopolitical index. So a planet can be broken down into a fairly simple code. For example, Terra, Earth in Star Trek's time, is 999994. So laying out the different technological aspects: space science, engineering, life, medical, physical sciences, planetary sciences, and psionics. So while Earth is very high in having warp drive and atomic level circuitry, etc., in psionics they only have psi activity widely recognized, rudimentary understanding of use. Sociopolitical indexes. Really lending you an easy way of storing lots of information about planets and coming up with stuff. So quick NPC design, sample characters for the different species, how to run a scenario, creating vibrant descriptions, stretching the design, ODing on technique, judging character generation. So choosing the ship and deciding what the players should be ranked, different modifiers, going through the skills here again, but for the Games Master, judging ground action. One thing I noticed is that things like starship navigation. This first edition skill is now the space science of astrogation. So the Games Master book lays out the changes between first and second edition. So anything published for first edition is really easy to convert. Thumbs up for that, definitely. Judging combat, injury, medical aid and death, equipment use, judging starship combat. So it gives you a shorter version of starship combat, but that's only like 2 pages. And then it's got sample logs here. So world log, life and civilization log, alien creature record, and character generation short form. And the weapons tables, just all the information you need from throughout the book laid out at the end. And that is the 1983 Star Trek The Role-Playing Game, 2nd edition. Now, I like it a lot. This really built out the Star Trek universe at the time and introduced some fascinating concepts. If you've seen anything about the Axanar film, it's heavily based on the stuff from the Star Trek role-playing game. The idea of the 4 Years' War against the Klingons, of everything coming out of the star system, Axanar it being the sort of key point in the war, of when the Federation turned things round. It's a nice background, although it doesn't match up at all with the official timeline. As soon as Star Trek Next Generation came out, the Klingons, for example, are completely different and have an explanation of why there's human-looking Klingons in the TV series, but by the first movie, which was the only one really out by the time this was published, they had the ridgy foreheads. And it explains that as the ridgy forehead ones are Imperial Klingons who come from the homeworld, whereas the other Klingons are crossbreeds, because the Klingons go out and conquer other races. So you will see a lot of other races serving along with the Klingons and being interbred with them. So it introduces the idea that while we've seen human-Klingon hybrids in the original series, there might be Romulan-Klingon hybrids or Orion-Klingon hybrids. The role-playing game introduces the idea of the triangle, an area of space between the Klingon Empire, the Romulan Empire, and the Federation, where lots of smuggling and things go on. So an area where players can take charge of their own destiny without serving out in a military campaign. But anyway, I think I've whittled on for quite long enough. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and comment below, as it does me massive favours with the YouTube algorithm. Really helps me out. If you've got any comments, please put them on. I do try and reply to them, although I am a little slow, I'll admit. But I do try my best. I tend to get back to people within a couple of days, a week at the most. But, as always, most of all, look after yourselves. And I'll catch you later. Bye now.